أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم. So alhamdulillah, it is beautiful to look around this room and feel the warmth of so many people, families, parents, youth, coming together to address a topic that is critical in our societies today. And I'm sure in the previous sessions, you've heard and talked about the difficulty of stepping away from an addiction, stepping away from something that makes you feel good, stepping away from that nafs al-ammara, that basis self that tells your body, that tells your insides, I want more. And the difficulty of stepping away from that which draws us to the I want more can be one of the hardest tests that we face in this dunya. But it's not always a physical demand that we are craving. It's not always drugs, it's not always food, it's not always the things that are tangible. But what we are seeing today in terms of addictions that fall more on the emotional end is an addiction to the high that one gets from the like on the Facebook post, from the high that one gets from the number of Instagram followers, from the high that one gets when their Snapchat story is popular, from the high that one gets when their image is touted and viewed as wow. And this high can be one of the most dangerous highs that we face because it doesn't fall in the realm of the tangible. It's common today for us to see at conferences, at programs, at gatherings, in school and after-school activities, in colleges, on campuses, people standing together, and sometimes alone, standing in front of a mirror, standing in front of a statue, standing in front of something that is an icon on a campus, in a museum, and going like this, staring at themselves in the screen. And no, they're not using the phone as a mirror to fix themselves. They're taking selfies. Why? Because we have become a society, a culture that is more obsessed than ever with the projection of an image of ourselves that we want to convey to the world. Because we have become fascinated and fixated not just on what am I wearing, how am I looking, but what is she wearing, what is he wearing? Look at those duck lips, look at that face that she's making, look at how this image is being projected. And because we have become such addictive consumers of social media, it has become a vicious cycle in many of our lives and in many of the lives of our youth. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows us better than we know ourselves, reminded us in the Quran, when He reminded us, أَعْلَمُوا إِنَّمَا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا لَعَبٌ وَلَهْوٌ وَزِينَةٌ وَتَفَاخُرٌ بَيْنَكُمْ وَتَكَاثُرٌ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reminded us this life, this hayat al-dunya is but what? It is but play and entertainment and adornment and boasting amongst you and competing in the accumulation of wealth and of children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. He knows us so well, and He knows that in this dunya, if we do not pay heed to what is most important, we will be sucked into the play, the entertainment, the adornment, the boasting, and the competing between one another. And so when we follow a YouTube influencer, When we follow somebody's Instagram page that has hundreds of thousands of followers, when we follow someone's Facebook feed, what do we find ourselves doing? Oftentimes we fall into that pit of comparison. Comparison of how they play. Look at that couple over there. They look like they're having so much fun on their vacation to Disney. We find ourselves comparing in the forms of entertainment, comparing the image, the look, what we see existing there. And we find ourselves falling into one of the most harmful elements among our ummah. A sin that is so harmful, that is so common at the same time. The sin of backbiting. And so as we compare entertainment, we find ourselves looking at a picture of a star and we say, oh, why is Priyanka Chopra with, I don't know who she's with, Justin Timberlake or Nick Jonas? There you go, yes, one of those Jonas brothers. And we compare and we think to ourselves, oh, he could do so much better than her. Or maybe the other way around, I don't know. I don't know what the common thread is. But we find ourselves falling into this pitfall, and it doesn't stop there. It becomes, look at what Amina is wearing in this picture. Look at who Muhammad is standing next to in this image. Look at this expression on her face. Look at what that one is wearing. Look at how that one is acting. And so we begin to go against the sanctity of protecting the image of our fellow brothers and sisters. We go against the injunctions within our deen of caring for one another and moving past that harm that can be caused with our tongues and with our judgment. And this is why we are reminded in Surah Al-Hujarat that the backbiter is like the one who eats the dead flesh of his brothers and sisters. Because it is as if we are taking from them their honor. How do we do that? Because in the process of judging, in the process of demeaning, in the process of backbiting, we are completely demolishing the self-image of those around us. And it's twofold. Because when we stand in the mirror in the bathroom and we take that selfie, when we stand and we make that duck face, when we post that picture, what are we really doing? What are we asking for? When we wake up in the morning and reach for our phone and immediately look at the post that we posted the night before to see how many likes we got. Or forget the night before, the post that we posted a few minutes ago, that we check consistently to see, what does the world think of me? This eats away at who we are. This eats away at what we stand for. This eats away at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us to know. That He is Al-Musawwar. He is the one who has created us in an image that is most beautiful. And He is Jamilun yuhibb al-jamal. He loves beauty, but how do we define beauty? Is beauty defined in the width of the pout that we make in the picture? Is beauty defined in the $500, or I don't know how much they cost, the sneakers, the Yeezys that we're wearing? Is beauty defined in the images we post and the likes that we get? Or is beauty defined differently? There was a couple years back, there was a series on Netflix that had come about that gained popularity with middle schoolers, with high schoolers, and with early college students. And it was a series called 13 Reasons Why. Now, if any of you are familiar with this series, you know that it was very graphic, very obscene almost, in its depiction of what a young 16-year-old or 17-year-old, I don't remember how old she was, but a high school student faced on the day-to-day basis of being a high school student. And the series chronicles the suicide, essentially, of this young woman in her own voice. And I remember when I first heard about this series, I heard about it from a 6th grader in our Islamic school. a 12-year-old. And I heard about it being the guidance counselor in that school. These 6th and 7th graders were writing these 3 letters on a lot of their papers, on their notes, and it was FML. And all of us as teachers were like going to urbandictionary.com and Googling FML and what does this mean? And we're like, is this, I don't know, something having to do with females? And after several weeks of digging, we learned that this was a saying that was said frequently in this series. And essentially the F stood for a bad word, and the M was my, and the L was life. And essentially it was what was written by these young people in this series when they wanted to take their own lives. And so hearing this, of course, I felt like I need to watch this. I need to know what these children are being exposed to. And I found that these middle schoolers and these high schoolers were watching episodes of this show that had me cringing, where I could barely watch between my fingers because of the graphic obscenity that was in this. And what was scarier was that they were connecting with this show. They were saying, this is how I feel. Now, what was at the core of these 13 episodes, these 13 reasons why this young woman in this fictionalized show that gained so much popularity, what was at the core of the reason why she would take her life? It started with a picture. It started with an image. A picture that was captured of her by her friends, a picture that was posted online, a picture that was shared on Instagram, a picture that circulated among her school friends, a picture that became her judgment. A picture that her classmates, her peers began to talk about. A picture that with every time that image was circulated, her own self-image took another hit and another hit and another hit. Because the obsession and the addiction that many of us, not just our young people, but those of us who are millennials and those of us who are Generation X and Generation Y and Generation Z, that those of us who carry one of these devices can get so easily sucked into the looking, the judging, the talking. And with every time that picture was shared, with every time someone else made a comment, someone else made a judgment, that young woman in that show got closer and closer to deciding that this life wasn't worth it anymore. And our children in our Islamic school said, I can relate. I feel this way sometimes. I feel like I'm not beautiful. I feel like I don't wear the right clothes. I feel like I'm too fat. I feel like I'm too skinny. I feel like no one likes me. I feel like I'm ugly. When our children have these mantras running through their mind, when their focus and their understanding of beauty is on the outside rather than the inside, this is when we as adults need to ask ourselves, where have we gone wrong? How have we failed our children? How have we failed ourselves? When we stand in the mirror and we look at an outfit we're wearing and our children happen to be around us and we say, if only I could lose 20 more pounds, I look so disgusting. And our child that night refuses to eat their dinner. Our 14-year-old, our 13-year-old, our 12-year-old stands in the mirror and mimics the words that come out of our mouth. We failed our children because here it is their self-image again taking hits. When we sit in a gathering and we whisper to a friend or to a colleague and we say, did you see what she was wearing the other day? Can you believe how she looked? We are failing our children and we are failing ourselves because we are failing in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us. Because beauty is not defined by the external. And we say this in cliches, we say this in famous sayings, don't judge a book by its cover. It's what's on the inside that matters. But do we practice that? Where do we get our notions of beauty? And how do we pass those notions on to our children? You know, it's interesting when we look at the Western notion of beauty. And we recognize that as we go past billboards, or we look in magazines, or we look at the popular stars, there's a standard of beauty that has been pushed upon us. That you are beautiful if you have blue eyes, you are beautiful if you have light skin, you are beautiful if you are this tall, you are beautiful if you're a size 0. And interestingly enough, several years ago, there was a study that was done by National Geographic on a tribe known as the Wadobe tribe out in Papua New Guinea. Now, this tribe had an interesting notion of beauty. For them, the concept of beauty resided in the males, not the females. Females were functional, males were beautiful. And a beautiful male was the one that had very white teeth and very black lips. And the beautiful male was the one that had a very long nose. The beautiful male was the one that had a high forehead. And the women, they were functional. They would cook and they would hunt for the game and they would carry the water. And the men would engage in this dance once a year in which the woman would select the most beautiful male and he would be the one most desirable to marry. And in order for the men to reach that standard of beauty, they would take this poisonous type of a liquid from a tree and put drops in their eyes because red eyes were considered beautiful. They would shave part of the hair on their head and draw a line from the back of their forehead to the tip of their nose to elongate their nose. And when the team of National Geographic researchers entered this tribe and began to meet with them, they kept thinking, this is so weird. How is that beautiful? And they shared with the tribe images of who we define as beautiful in the West. And when the Wadobe tribe looked at these pictures, they laughed. Because to them, that wasn't beauty. The beauty that we as human beings judge externally is a superficial beauty. It's a beauty that has been defined by marketers. It's a beauty that has been defined by the commercial state that wants to make money off of selling products to those who are most vulnerable. Selling a variety of creams to our young women, selling a variety of diet plans, selling a variety of sneakers, all sorts of things. Because we have become commodified. When we stop ascribing to the definition of beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, then we fall prey to a definition of beauty that is filled with false notions. To a definition of beauty that holds no water. To a definition of beauty that tells us if we take enough selfies in just the right light, with just the right angle, then we are beautiful. And this is how we have depleted the self-image of our youth. This is how we have broken the minds and the hearts and the bodies in so many ways, in so many spaces. But when we look at the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when we look at how he saw beauty and he defined beauty, we begin to understand what it means to truly be beautiful. To recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beautifies on the outside the one who beautifies himself on the inside. We look at the example of Julaybib radiallahu anhu. The Sahabi whose name was a name of humiliation almost. A name that meant a diminutive or a small type of a clothing, meaning he must have been very diminutive in stature. Julaybib, who at a time when lineage was so critical and important, had no lineage that he could trace. Julaybib, who was deformed, Julaybib, who would be made fun of, Julaybib, who was called behind his back Damim, which means the ugly one. And yet, he was so close to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam loved Julaybib. loved him for the beauty that he saw in him, loved him for the beauty that he knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had bestowed within him. And so when it came time for Julaybib to seek marriage, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam approached one of the most well-known families at that time in Mecca. And this family had a beautiful daughter, beautiful in the sense of the word that we knew externally, but beautiful on the inside as well, in her love of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Allah. And so he went to this family and he said, I am interested in speaking to you about your daughter's marriage. And so the father initially beamed with pride because he felt that this was the Prophet of God, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, coming to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. And he smiled. And he began to nod his head in agreement. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stopped him and said, I am not asking for her hand in marriage for me. I am asking for her for Julaybib. And the father's face darkened, and any traces of happiness on it went away. And he thought to himself, Julaybib? And of course, his initial instinct was to reject it. But he said he would speak to the mother of his daughter, he would speak to his wife. And so he went to his wife and he said, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has come to ask for the hand of our daughter to Julaybib. And the mother, upon hearing this, was appalled, and she said, never! He has no lineage. He is unattractive. He has no wealth. He has no name. Now the daughter, upon hearing this conversation, came down and said to her parents, it must be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves Julaybib for the Prophet himself sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to come and ask for me to marry him. And will you reject a commandment that comes from the Prophet, that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so upon hearing this, her parents reluctantly agreed. And this beautiful woman, who other women in the town would compete with her, beautiful externally and internally, married Julaybib. And shortly after their marriage, Julaybib went upon an expedition where before he left the home, his father-in-law said to him, why are you going to go on an expedition with the Prophet? You are newly married, stay here. And Julaybib, in his love for the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, said, I will not leave my Prophet on a battlefield in harm's way and rest in the lap of luxury with my wife. And so he left the home to be with his beloved messenger. And it was in that battle that Julaybib was killed. And when the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after the battle, looked around, he continued to ask, where is my Julaybib? Where is my beloved Julaybib? And when the Sahaba brought him to see Julaybib, he carried him himself and buried him and repeated, I am of him and he is of me. I am of him and he is of me. As he buried this man who had been called the ugly one, as he buried this man who was beloved to him and beloved to Allah. This is beauty. Beauty is not defined by the likes we get. Beauty is not defined by how we look in an image. Beauty is not defined by what the world tells us is beautiful. Beauty is defined in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. Beauty is defined in the way we carry ourselves, in the way we interact. And we go back to that verse that we began with. أَعْلَمُوا إِنَّمَا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا أَلَعْبٌ وَلَهْوٌ وَزِينَةٌ وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد. We go back to that verse and we recognize the rest of it, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that this hayat al-dunya that is filled with display, this adornment, this focus on looks and fashion, it will end كَمَثَلِ الْغَيْثِ. It will end like the wheat that will turn yellow, that will dry, that will fall, and that will be buried. Because the beauty that we utilize today to judge one another with, the beauty in quotes, which is a false beauty, is not the beauty that lasts. It's one that will end when we end. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى, that the one who will be successful is the one who purifies the self. The one who is able to step away from desires, is able to push that feeling that I want more, and focus instead on what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want from me? What do I do to get closer to Allah? There was a beautiful story that was shared recently about a young woman a few years back who lived in France. And when she lived in France, she was going to a public school. And back in the early 2000s, in France, there was a hijab ban. And so all young women who attended public school, because it was considered a public place, were told that they could not wear hijab. And in order to avoid, backlash of Islamophobia, they expanded it and said, any type of religious sign couldn't be worn. So this young woman, who was about 16 years old, decided that if she wasn't going to be allowed to wear her hijab, she would shave her hair. And so she shaved her hair and she attended school, 16 years old. And she was made fun of, and she was mimicked, and she was teased. And so every day she would still go to school with this sign of protest. And so eventually the media wanted to interview her, wanted to talk to her and see, what was this all about? And she responded to the media when they asked her, why would you do this? This is the age when kids want to look good. You shaving your hair, why? And she said, if in order to please my Creator, I have to displease the creation, then I am happy with that. And eventually, because of this girl's steadfastness, because of her perseverance, the hijab ban was lifted in public schools in France. Because when we answer the call of the Creator, when we step away from the judgment, from the fascination of looking, seeing, talking, backbiting of the creation, then we truly begin to understand what beauty is. And this is when we can elevate our self-image, not in a way that is filled with riya or kibriya, with showing off, but instead in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognizing that we love our Creator and we love His creation and that we are a part of that creation. So in loving Him, we also have to love ourselves and love one another and love our children. So the final words that I would want to share is for parents in this room. Remind your children of the beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed them with. Remind your children that they are beautiful just the way they are, that it is not the 20 pounds they have to lose, it is not the change in how they carry themselves, it is not in how they sit, that their beauty resides in their actions, their beauty resides in them pleasing the Creator. And those young people who are here, I promise you, Your worth is not determined by how many likes your picture gets. Your worth is not determined by how many people like the shoes you're wearing, the dress you put on, the outfit that you chose so painstakingly. Your value resides in something much higher, something much loftier. It resides in your love of Allah and in your actions to please Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to please Him with our actions, our words, and our deeds. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum.